The cold stone of the ancestral altar bit into my knees, but the chill in my chest was sharper. Today was supposed to be the day my life began. As the daughter of a fallen beta, I had spent years scrubbing floors and mending tunics, all while whispering a single name like a prayer: Fenris. He was the Silver Moon Alpha, powerful, lethal, and according to the elders, my fated mate. I could feel the pull in my soul, a golden tether reaching out to him. But as I looked up, Fenris wasn't looking at me with love. He was looking at me like I was a stain on his polished floor. Prologue. The great hall was packed. The scent of pine and wet fur hung heavy in the air. Outside, a storm lashed against the stained glass windows, mirroring the turbulence in my gut. "Elara of the Low Blood!" Fenris's voice boomed, vibrating through the floorboards. He stood a head taller than any man in the room, his black leather vest straining against shoulders that could carry the weight of the world. I stepped forward, my heart a frantic drum. I reached out, my fingers trembling, hoping to catch the spark of the bond. But as our skin touched, Fenris didn't gasp in wonder. He flinched in revulsion. "You!" he spat, the word echoing in the sudden silence. "You are the one the moon goddess chose for me? A weakling? A servant who smells of dishwater and ash?" "Fenris!" I whispered, the bond screaming in my head, begging for him to acknowledge it. He turned to the crowd, his eyes glowing a predatory gold. Beside him stood Lady Lyra, a she-wolf from the Iron Ridge pack, draped in white fox fur and smelling of expensive jasmine. She smirked, her eyes raking over my threadbare dress. "A king needs a queen, not a charity case," Lyra purred. Fenris looked back at me, his face hardening into a mask of ice. "I, Alpha Fenris of the Silver Moon Pack, reject you, Elara, as my mate and future Luna. Our bond is a mistake, one I am correcting today." The rejection hit me like a physical blow. A searing pain erupted in my chest as the golden tether snapped. I fell to my hands and knees, a silent scream tearing through my throat. It felt as if my soul was being ripped out through my ribs. "Get up," Fenris commanded, his voice devoid of pity. "You are an embarrassment to this pack. By tomorrow you will be gone. I will not have a rejected Omega haunting my halls while I celebrate my true alliance with Lyra." I clutched my stomach, a sudden sharp cramp blooming deep in my womb. My breath hitched. In that moment of agony, something shifted. Amidst the wreckage of the bond, I felt it, a tiny, flickering spark. Not a mate's spark, a life spark, two of them. I was pregnant. The heirs to the Silver Moon Pack were inside me, and their father had just cast us into the dirt. "Did you hear him, Trash?" Lyra stepped forward, her heel grinding into the hem of my dress. "Leave, before the enforcers help you find the cliffside." I looked up, my vision blurred by tears, but my spirit was beginning to harden. I saw Fenris take Lyra's hand. He didn't even look back as he led her toward the high throne. I stood up, my legs shaking, but my hands protectively shielding my stomach. They thought I was leaving alone. They thought they were throwing away a burden. They had no idea they were throwing away their future. "I'm going," I said, my voice low but steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. I looked Fenris in the eye one last time. "But remember this moment, Alpha, because one day you will realize that you didn't just reject a mate, you rejected a queen." I turned and walked out into the freezing rain, the doors of the great hall slamming shut behind me. The darkness of the forest swallowed me whole, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the shadows. I had a secret to protect and a kingdom to build. Welcome to Lily's Heart Tales, the home of stories that bite back. If you've ever felt overlooked, discarded, or told you weren't enough, this story is for you. Today, we follow Elara, a girl who lost everything in a single night of betrayal, only to discover she was carrying a secret that would bring an empire to its knees. If you're new to the channel, join our growing pack by hitting that subscribe button and turning on the notification bell. You don't want to miss a single chapter of this journey from exile to royalty. Imagine the person you trusted most in the world publicly humiliates you, not knowing you are carrying their legacy. If you were Elara, would you ever let Alpha Fenris see his children, or would you let him live the rest of his life wondering why his bloodline ended with him? Tell me your revenge strategy in the comments. I'll be hearting the most creative ones. Chapter 1. The cold rain didn't just wash away my tears, it washed away the girl who believed in fairy tales. As the heavy iron gates of the Silver Moon Pack slammed shut behind me, the sound echoed like a funeral bell. I stood on the muddy border, my thin dress clinging to my skin, staring into the hollow lands, a desolate stretch of gray stone and twisted trees where wolves go to die. "Keep moving, rogue!" the guard shouted from the battlements. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might have stayed and begged, and I would rather die than give Fenris the satisfaction of seeing me crawl. I clutched my stomach. The pain from the rejection was a dull roar now, but the new life inside me, two tiny, pulsing sparks, felt like a warm hearth in a blizzard. "I am not alone," I whispered to the dark. "We are a pack of 3 now." The first few hours were a blur of shivering and stumbling. Rogue life isn't like the stories. There is no glory in the wild when you are a Null, a wolf with low-ranking blood. My scent was weak, my claws were dull, and for the first time in my life, I was truly hungry. I found a small hollow beneath the roots of an ancient, lightning-scarred oak tree. It smelled of damp earth and old rot, but it was dry. I crawled inside, curling into a ball. As the moon reached its peak, a strange sensation began to crawl up my spine. It wasn't the pain of the bond snapping anymore. It was a rhythmic thrumming, like a drum beating beneath the earth. I looked at my hands. They weren't shaking from the cold anymore. They were glowing with a soft, ethereal silver, a light that didn't come from the moon, but from within my own marrow. "The stars do not bow to the moon," a voice whispered in the wind. It sounded like my grandmother, the woman they called Mad before she disappeared. In the Silver Moon Pack, we were taught that the moon goddess was the only source of power. But as the silver light spread across my skin, I realized the lie. My lineage, the star blood, was older than the Pack's. It was the power of the void, the light that exists when the moon is hidden. I reached out and touched a withered, frozen mushroom growing on a root. The silver light flowed from my fingertips, and before my eyes, the fungus puffed up, turning a healthy, vibrant white. I ate it greedily. It tasted like honey and earth. My strength surged. The hunger wasn't just for food. It was my body demanding the energy to fuel a transformation I didn't yet understand. I wasn't just a pregnant rogue. I was a vessel for an ancient magic that Fenris's bloodline had tried to stomp out centuries ago. But my moment of wonder was cut short. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the floor of my hollow. I wasn't the only thing hunting in the Hollowlands. A pair of red eyes caught the silver glow of my skin. A scavenger, a wolf turned feral by madness, was creeping toward my hiding spot. I had no pack to defend me, no alpha to save me. I looked at my glowing palms and bared my teeth. "Try it," I snarled. "I have more to lose than you." The feral wolf lunged, a blur of matted fur and bared yellow teeth. In my old life, I would have cowered. I would have waited for a male to step in front of me. But as the beast snapped at my throat, my instincts didn't scream hide, they screamed protect. I didn't shift into my wolf form. I couldn't risk the strain on the twins. Instead, I lashed out with a hand bathed in that strange, cold silver light. When my palm struck the scavenger's chest, it wasn't a physical blow. It was a pulse of pure, celestial energy. The feral wolf was thrown back, yelping as if the very air had turned to stone. He scrambled away into the underbrush, his madness dampened by the shock of a power he couldn't comprehend. I leaned against the oak tree, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The silver glow subsided, leaving me in the dim gray of pre-dawn. That's when I heard it. Not a growl, but a piteous metallic whine. A few yards away, near a cluster of jagged rocks, lay another wolf. He was an old brute, his fur a salt and pepper gray, pinned to the earth by a massive silver-toothed trap. This was no hunting tool. This was an executioner's jaw, designed to slowly poison a shifter with silver while they bled out. I approached cautiously. The old wolf bared his teeth, but there was no fire in his eyes, only the hollow look of someone waiting for the end. "I'm not here to hurt you," I whispered. The smell of the silver was nauseating, even to me. It was a scent that represented everything the high packs used to keep the low bloods in line. This wolf was an Omega, a discarded piece of some forgotten pack, left here to rot. I reached for the trap. My skin hissed as it touched the silver, but the star blood in my veins surged. The light didn't just glow this time, it flowed into the metal. To my shock, the silver didn't burn me. Instead, it grew brittle, the ancient metal groaning until the spring snapped. The old wolf was free. He collapsed, his breathing shallow. I knelt beside him. I knew I should save my energy for the twins, but I couldn't leave him. I placed my hand over his mangled leg. I visualized the star blood acting as a bridge, knitting the bone and purging the silver poison. "Live," I commanded. It wasn't a request. It was the first command of a Luna who had found her voice. A ripple of silver light passed from my hand into his body. His wounds didn't just heal, they vanished, leaving behind fur that shimmered with a new, healthy luster. The old wolf shifted. A moment later, a man with a weathered face and eyes as clear as the morning sky stood before me. He looked at his healed leg, then at me. He didn't see an outcast. He didn't see a pregnant Null. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head so low it touched the mud. "I am Silas," he rasped, his voice cracked with years of silence. "I was an Omega of the North Wind. They left me for dead. My life was over. Until you spoke to the stars." "I am no one's Luna, Silas," I said, though my heart beat with a new rhythm. "No," Silas replied, looking up with fierce loyalty. "You are the only Luna I will ever serve. The packs follow blood and bone. I will follow the light." I looked at him, my first follower, a rejected Omega and a pregnant rogue. It wasn't much of a pack, but as the sun finally broke over the horizon, casting our long shadows across the Hollowlands, I knew one thing for certain. The Silver Moon Pack thought they had exiled me to a grave. They didn't realize they had given me a kingdom. Chapter 2. The months that followed were a blur of growing bellies and growing walls. Under Silas's guidance, we found the Cradle of the Moon, a hidden valley protected by jagged peaks that messed with the scent trails of any pursuing trackers. But as the first snow of the great winter began to fall, my body finally signaled that the time of waiting was over. The storm outside the cave was a screaming banshee, clawing at the stone entrance we had reinforced with cedar logs. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dried herbs and the iron tang of my own blood. I lay on a bed of soft furs, clutching the hand of a female scout we had rescued just weeks prior. My vision blurred as the contractions hit. Each one felt like a tectonic plate shifting in my soul. "Push, Luna," Silas urged from the entrance, his back turned to give me privacy while he kept guard. "The stars are high. They are waiting for their heirs." With a final guttural scream that shook the stalactites above, the first cry pierced the frozen air. He was heavy and warm. As I pulled him to my chest, I felt a jolt of raw, mountain-crushing power. His tiny tuft of hair was as dark as Fenris's, and his scent, even as a newborn, was that of a high alpha. He carried the physical dominance of the lineage that had rejected us, but the birth wasn't over. Minutes later, a second child arrived, a girl. She was smaller, quieter, but as I touched her, the cave didn't feel cold anymore. The star blood in my veins sang in harmony with her heartbeat. Her eyes didn't open to see the dark. They opened to emit a soft, pulsing silver glow. She didn't carry the Alpha's strength. She carried the Seer's magic. "A king of the earth," I whispered, kissing the boy's forehead. "And a queen of the stars," I breathed, cradling the girl. The peace of the moment was shattered by a sound that made the fur on my neck stand up. It wasn't the wind. It was the howl of a bloodhound, the specialized tracking wolves used by the Silver Moon Pack to find high-value targets. Fenris hadn't forgotten. Whether it was guilt or a lingering tether to the heirs he didn't know he had sent his most ruthless hunters to finish what the rejection started. "They're at the valley mouth," Silas hissed, his claws sliding out with a metallic shing. The storm slowed them, but the scent of the birth, it's like a beacon in the night. I looked down at my children. I was exhausted, my body broken and bleeding, and the most elite killers in the territory were minutes away. In my old life, I would have cried. I would have begged for a miracle. But as I looked at my daughter's glowing silver eyes, I realized I was the miracle. "Silas," I said, my voice eerily calm as I stood up, wrapped in a blood-stained cloak. "Stay with the children. Don't let the fire go out." "Luna, you can't fight. I'm not going to fight them with claws, Silas," I said, the star blood beginning to swirl around my feet like a silver mist. "I'm going to show them why the forest belongs to the Forsaken now." The snow didn't feel cold against my skin. It felt like a canvas. As I stepped out of the cave, the wind tried to knock me back, but I planted my feet. My body was weak, but my soul was overflowing. The star blood was no longer just a flicker. It was a torrential flood, fueled by the primal protective instinct of a mother who had nothing left to lose. 4 bloodhounds emerged from the tree line, their massive forms silhouetted against the white drifts. These weren't just wolves. They were monsters bred for cruelty, their necks scarred by the heavy iron collars of the Silver Moon Pack. "The rogue is here," the lead hunter growled, shifting into his human form, a scarred man named Varric. He sniffed the air, his eyes widening. "And she's brought the Alpha's bastards into the world. Fenris will pay well for their heads." "They are not his," I said, my voice resonating with a frequency that made the falling snow vibrate. "They are mine, and this forest is no longer his jurisdiction." Varric laughed and lunged, but I didn't flinch. I slammed my palm into the frozen ground. I didn't just use magic. I rewrote the physics of the clearing. The star blood shot through the earth like veins of silver lightning. Suddenly, the laws of the pack, the ancient hierarchy that gave alphas power over others, snapped. The gravity of the star. Within the circle of my light, the hunters' weight tripled. They crashed to their knees, their bones groaning under the pressure of a star gravity they couldn't fight. The voice of the void. When I spoke, it wasn't a growl, it was the sound of the universe. "In my pack, the collar does not make the wolf, the heart does." Varric struggled to lift his head, his face contorted in terror. What are you?" "I am the lawbreaker," I whispered. I walked up to the lead hunter. I didn't kill him. Instead, I reached out and touched his iron collar. The silver light from my fingers ate through the metal like acid. The heavy iron shattered, falling into the snow. For the first time in his life, the bloodhound's mind was clear. The alpha link that forced him to obey Fenris was severed. He gasped, his eyes shifting from a feral red to a soft, natural brown. "You are free," I told him. "Go back to Fenris. Tell him that the woman he rejected is building a world where his name is a curse. Tell him his heirs are safe, but they will never call him father." The hunters didn't attack again. They couldn't. The very air around me was sacred. They scrambled back into the trees, not as soldiers, but as broken men who had just seen a goddess. I turned back to the cave, my strength finally failing. I collapsed into Silas's arms at the entrance. He looked at me with a reverence that bordered on worship. "You didn't just save them, Luna," Silas whispered, looking at the shattered iron collars in the snow. You changed the way the world works. You've broken the mating law." "This is just the beginning, Silas," I rasped, looking at my twins, safe and warm by the fire. "We aren't hiding anymore. We are building." That night, as the twins slept, I realized my destiny wasn't just to be a Luna. It was to be a creator. I was going to build a city for the broken, and I was going to make sure that no wolf ever had to feel the cold of rejection again. Chapter 3. 3 years have passed since the night the bloodhounds fell in the snow. The cradle of the moon is no longer just a cave. It has transformed into Astraea, the first city in history built by the rejected for the rejected. Standing on the limestone balcony of the Star Keep, I look out over my domain. What was once a dead valley is now a bustling hub of life. I see Omegas, once treated as slaves, now acting as master architects, using starblood-infused mortar to build walls that shimmer like moonlight. "Mama, look, I caught a wind spirit!" I turn to see my 3-year-old twins, Leo and Nova, racing across the balcony. Leo is a miniature version of his father in looks, broad-shouldered even now, with a playful, dominant growl. But his eyes are soft, filled with the kindness I've instilled in him. Nova, however, is pure stardust. She doesn't run. She seems to glide, her feet barely touching the stone. She holds a glowing ball of silver energy between her palms, a star spark she manifested all on her own. "Careful, Nova," I say, kneeling to gather them into my arms. "The light is a gift, not a toy." "But Silas said I have the strongest heartbeat in the valley," she chirps, her eyes glowing with that familiar amber-silver light. My moment of peace is shattered by Silas approaching, his face grim. He is now the commander of the Star Guard, draped in armor made from refined silver that doesn't burn, thanks to my unbinding ritual. "Luna," he says, bowing. "The scouts have found something at the border, not bloodhounds. A diplomat." "A diplomat?" I ask, my grip tightening on the children's shoulders. "From where?" "The Silver Moon Pack. Fenris has sent an envoy. He's asking for an audience." In the star blood vision I occasionally receive, I see the truth Silas doesn't know yet. Fenris's pack is dying. His alliance with Lady Lyra turned out to be a curse. She is barren, and without a true heir, the Silver Moon Pack is splintering. The warriors are losing faith in an alpha who rejected his fated mate for a political lie. "He doesn't want an audience," I whisper, my eyes flashing gold. "He wants his bloodline back. He's realized the Null he threw away was the only thing keeping his legacy alive." "Shall I send them away?" Silas asks, his hand moving to the hilt of his blade. I look at Leo and Nova. I look at the city I built from nothing. "No. Let them in. Let them see the walls they told me I'd never build. Let them see that the dead weight is now the heaviest crown in the world." The stage is set. The man who broke my heart is about to see the empire I built with the pieces. The gates of Astraea creaked open, not out of fear, but as a deliberate display of power. The envoy from the Silver Moon Pack was led by Beta Kale, Fenris's childhood friend, and the man who had stood by and watched as I was dragged out into the rain 3 years ago. As he walked through the marketplace, his jaw dropped. He saw Omegas trading fine silks, crippled warriors standing guard with prosthetic limbs powered by starblood crystals, and a level of prosperity that his own starving pack hadn't seen in a decade. I met Kyle in the high pavilion. I sat on a throne of carved white oak, my twins playing at my feet. I didn't wear a crown of gold. I wore a crown of pure light that hovered just above my brow. "Elara," Kyle whispered, his voice trembling. He moved to bow, but I raised a hand. "You will address me as Luna of the Star Blood, or you will not address me at all, Kyle." He swallowed hard. "Luna, Alpha Fenris sends his regrets. He is ill. The pack bond is rotting from within because he has no heir. He asks that you return. He is willing to reinstate you as his true mate." I felt a tug on my skirt. Little Nova was looking at Kale, her silver eyes pulsing rhythmically. She didn't see the diplomat's clothes. She saw the vibration of intent. "Mama," she whispered, her voice carrying a strange metallic echo. "The man is wearing two faces. One is sad, but the other is sharp, like a knife." Nova reached out a tiny hand toward Kyle. A wave of silver light rippled from her fingertips, washing over the beta. The light hit Kale's chest, and a glamour spell shattered. Beneath his cloak, strapped to his inner thigh, was a void siphon, a forbidden dark relic designed to drain the life force of a mother to jumpstart a failing pack bond. He wasn't here to bring me home. He was here to kidnap me and drain me dry to save Fenris's dying legacy. "Nova, step back," I commanded, my voice dropping an octave as my star blood turned from warm silver to a dangerous, cold violet. Kale lunged, reaching for the relic, but Silas was faster. Before Kale could move an inch, Silas's blade was at his throat. The Star Guard moved in a unified blur, surrounding the envoy. "You thought I was still the girl who cried at your feet?" I stood up, the ground beneath me cracking from the sheer pressure of my aura. "You thought I wouldn't see the rot in your heart?" "Fenris is desperate!" Kale screamed, pinned to the floor. "The pack is dying. If we don't have the heirs, the silver moon will vanish by the next winter. He didn't want to do this, but Lyra, she convinced him it was the only way." I looked at the void siphon, the cruel tool they intended to use on me. In my old life, I would have used it on him, but I was building a new world. "Take him to the border," I told Silas, "but first, have Nova mark him." Nova stepped forward, placing a glowing thumb on Kale's forehead. A permanent silver star burned into his skin, a mark of the betrayer. "Tell Fenris this," I said, leaning down so my eyes were inches from Kale's. "His pack isn't dying because of a lack of heirs. It's dying because it's built on a foundation of cowards. If he wants to see his children, he can come himself. But he should know, I am no longer his mate. I am his judgment." As they dragged Kale away, Nova looked at me, her glow fading. "Will he come, Mama?" "He will," I said, looking toward the horizon where the silver moon peaks loomed. "And when he does, he'll realize that some bonds, once broken, can never be mended, even by a king." Chapter 4. The failure of the assassination plot was the final crack in the silver moon's foundation. The news of the marked beta returned to Fenris like a poison. He realized that Astraea wasn't a camp of rogues, it was a superpower. 1 week later, the horns of the valley didn't blow for an army. They blew for a single rider. I stood upon the ramparts of the outer wall, the wind whipping my silver-trimmed cloak. Below, standing in the neutral zone between the forest and my gates, was a man who looked like a ghost of the Alpha I once loved. Fenris was disheveled, his cloak was torn, and the vibrant gold of his eyes had faded to a muddy amber, the mark of an Alpha whose pack bond is rotting from the inside out. He was alone, unarmed, and kneeling in the mud. "Elara," he roared, his voice cracking. "I don't come for war, I come for mercy." I signaled for the gates to open. I walked out to meet him, flanked by Silas and a dozen Star Guard warriors. I didn't stop until I was standing directly over him. "Mercy is a luxury of the strong, Fenris," I said, my voice cold. "What could you possibly offer me in exchange for it?" He looked up, and for a second I saw the man I used to worship. But the feeling was gone. The mating bond was a dead nerve. "I was wrong," he whispered. "Lyra. She poisoned my mind. She told me our blood would be weak, but I see now, the stars, they chose you for a reason." "You didn't realize that when I was scrubbing your floors," I replied. "You realized it when your stores went empty and your warriors started deserting to join my ranks." Fenris reached out, his hand trembling as if to touch the hem of my dress. But Silas stepped forward, the tip of his silver spear whistling through the air to rest at Fenris's throat. "I am dying, Elara," Fenris gasped, ignoring the spear. "The pack needs the heirs. If Leo and Nova return with me, the bond will stabilize. I will abdicate. I will make Leo the Alpha and you the Regent. Just don't let the silver moon name vanish into the dark." I felt a surge of ancient, star-blood anger. He still saw my children as tools. He didn't want his son. He wanted a stabilizer for his failing ego. My children are not stabilizers, Fenris. They are people, and they don't even know your name. Please, he begged, tears finally tracking through the dirt on his face. Just let me see them. Once. Let me know that my blood survives. I looked at the gate, where Leo and Nova were watching through the bars, their small faces filled with curiosity. I felt a flicker of the old Elara, the one who wanted to be kind. But then I remembered the rain. I remembered the executioner's jaw trap that almost killed Silas. You want to see your bloodline? I asked. Fine, but you will see it as a stranger. You will see what you threw away, and you will carry that image back to your empty throne. I signaled the guards to bring the children forward. Fenris's eyes lit up with a desperate, hungry hope. But as the children approached, they didn't run to him. They stopped 10 feet away, hiding behind my skirts, looking at him with the same caution they would show a wounded, dangerous animal. Who is the sad man, Mama? Leo asked, his voice echoing in the silent clearing. Fenris flinched as if he'd been struck. The Alpha's regret wasn't just a feeling. It was a physical weight that began to crush his remaining power. The moment of sentimentality was a trap. As the word sad man left Leo's lips, the air around Fenris didn't just turn cold, it turned stagnant. The desperate, weeping Alpha I saw moments ago vanished, replaced by a man whose eyes flickered with a frantic, cornered madness. A stranger, Fenris whispered, standing up slowly. The phantom pain of his rotting bond seemed to ignite into a dark fire. You would make me a stranger to my own flesh and blood? You made yourself a stranger the night you chose an alliance over your soul, I replied, stepping in front of the twins. Fenris didn't lunge at me. Instead, he pulled a crumpled parchment from his tunic and threw it into the mud between us. You think you've built a sanctuary, Elara? You've built a target. While I knelt here, Lyra's purge squads moved into the neutral territories. They've rounded up the families of every forsaken wolf in your city. She's mad, Elara, Fenris hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and malice. She knows I came here. She told me if I don't return with the heirs by the next moon, she will execute every hostage. Your Omegas, your builders, your scouts, their families will pay for your new law in blood. The Star Guard bristled, their silver spears leveling at Fenris's chest. Silas looked at me, waiting for the order to kill. But the weight of the crown I had built was suddenly heavy. My city was built on the promise of safety. If I let those families die, the foundation of Astraea would crumble. You brought a war to my gates under a flag of truce, I said, my star blood beginning to pulse with a violet rhythmic light. I brought you a choice, Fenris screamed. The heirs for the hostages. Return to the silver moon. Let the bond be mended, and the purge stops. I looked down at Nova. She wasn't crying. She was staring at the parchment in the mud, her silver eyes scanning the names of the captured villages. She looked up at me and nodded, a silent signal that her star sight had located them. I refuse, I said, my voice echoing like thunder across the valley. Fenris froze. You... what? You would let them die? I would never let them die, I said, stepping toward him until the violet light of my aura forced him to shield his eyes. But I will not trade my children for a lie. You think you're the only one who can move pieces on a board, Fenris? You've spent 3 years stagnant. I've spent 3 years evolving. I closed my eyes and reached out through the starblood. I didn't just talk to my guards. I talked to every unbound wolf in the neutral territories. I sent a pulse of pure, golden command through the air. To all who are forsaken, my voice projected into the minds of every wolf for 50 miles. The silver moon has overstepped. Rise, protect your own. The Luna of the stars is with you. From the tree line behind Fenris, dozens of shadows emerged. They weren't his warriors. They were the scavengers and nulls from Chapter 1, now armed and trained. They hadn't waited for orders. They had been waiting for the signal. "Silas, take the Alpha to the dungeon," I commanded, "and prepare the Star Guard. We aren't defending Astraea anymore." I picked up Leo and Nova, looking them in the eyes. "Stay with the nurses. Mama has to go burn down a palace." The War of Two Packs hadn't just begun. It had been won the moment Fenris thought I would choose his path over my own. Chapter 5. The Silver Moon Palace, once my prison of chores and shame, now loomed ahead like a tomb. But I didn't come as a servant. I came as a storm. While my unbound warriors engaged the purge squads in the valleys, I led the elite Star Guard through the secret mountain passes I had discovered as a girl. Paths the Alphas were too proud to notice. The air inside the palace was stagnant, smelling of incense and rotting magic. Fenris's influence had faded so much that the very walls seemed to be weeping. We moved like shadows, silver blades unsheathed, until we reached the Great Hall, the very place where I had been rejected 3 years ago. Waiting for me wasn't an army, but a single woman. Lady Lyra sat on the high throne, her jasmine scent now replaced by the acrid sting of sulfur. Around her, a swirling vortex of black smoke obscured the floor. "The little stray returned," Lyra sneered, her eyes glowing with a sickly, artificial purple. "You think a bit of starlight makes you a goddess? You're still just a girl who couldn't keep her mate." Lyra didn't shift into a wolf. Instead, she stood, and the shadows behind her elongated into the shape of a monstrous, many-limbed beast. She hadn't just used dark relics. She had made a void pact. She was consuming the life force of the Silver Moon Pack to fuel her own immortality. "The hostages aren't in the cells, Elara," Lyra laughed, a sound like grinding glass. "They are the fuel. Every time you strike me, a child in the neutral territories withers. Go ahead, be the hero you think you are." I felt the star blood in my veins recoil. My power was built on connection, and Lyra had turned that connection into a weapon. If I used my light to destroy her, I would kill the very people I came to save. "Luna, look out!" Silas shouted. From the shadows of the pillars, 3 of my own scouts stepped forward, their eyes glazed over with the same purple rot as Lyra's. They hadn't been captured. They had been seduced by the promise of the power Lyra offered. "Even your Forsaken can be bought," Lyra whispered. "Everyone has a price, Elara. What's yours? Give me the star blood, and I'll let your precious peasants live." I looked at my former friends, their claws extended toward me. I didn't raise my sword. I closed my eyes and focused on the star link I had built with every member of my city. "Loyalty isn't bought," I said, my voice vibrating with a frequency that shattered the windows of the hall. "It is forged." I didn't attack Lyra. I targeted the link itself. I sent a pulse of pure, unconditional forgiveness through the star blood. I didn't try to overpower the dark magic. I made it irrelevant by reminding the scouts of who they were. The purple light in their eyes flickered. They gasped, dropping their weapons as the Void Pact lost its grip on their minds. "Impossible!" Lyra shrieked, her shadow beast roaring in frustration. "No one can break a void link!" "You call it a link," I said, stepping into the black smoke, my footsteps leaving glowing silver prints on the stone. "I call it a leash, and I'm the one who breaks collars." But as I reached the foot of the throne, the ground began to shake. Lyra wasn't done. She realized she couldn't control my pack, so she decided to sink the entire palace into the void, with all of us inside. The great hall groaned, the marble floor splitting like parched earth. But the cracks didn't show the dirt of the mountain. They showed a swirling, infinite abyss of violet static. The palace wasn't just falling, it was being erased. As the shadows deepened, Lyra's form began to distort. She was no longer a wolf or a woman. She had become a conduit for the Void Mother, an ancient, cosmic hunger that feeds on failed timelines and broken spirits. The hostages weren't just fuel. Their souls were being knitted into a void web, a dark net that would allow this entity to anchor itself in our world. "Luna, the floor is gone!" Silas yelled, grabbing a stone pillar as the gravity in the room inverted. I didn't try to climb out. I looked into the abyss and saw the star links of the hostages, tiny, flickering sparks of gold trapped in a cage of obsidian smoke. "I have to go in," I said, my voice steady despite the roar of the collapsing dimension. "You'll be erased," Silas pleaded. "The star blood doesn't erase," I replied, my eyes turning a blinding solid silver. "It illuminates." I let go of the ledge. I plunged into the cold, oily dark. In the void, time didn't exist. I saw 1,000 versions of my life. I saw a version where I stayed in the silver moon and died in childbirth. I saw a version where I killed Fenris and became a tyrant. The Void Mother whispered to me, her voice a billion overlapping screams. "You are a mistake, a rejected fragment. Return to the nothingness." I didn't fight her with a blade. I reached out and grabbed the soul web. The dark strands burned my skin, turning my silver light into a bruised purple. But I didn't let go. I began to anoint the darkness. I poured every memory of Astraea, the smell of the cedar logs, the laughter of Leo and Nova, the loyalty of Silas, into the web. I replaced the void logic of hunger with the star logic of abundance. The Void Mother shrieked, "A being that exists only to consume cannot process a power that exists only to give." The obsidian cage shattered. The hostage souls weren't just released. They were supercharged by the star blood. They turned into a swarm of golden light, rising like a phoenix through the darkness. As we ascended, I saw Lyra at the center of the collapse. Without the hostages to fuel her, the Void Mother began to feed on her. "Elara, help me!" she screamed, her hand reaching out as her body began to dissolve into static. I reached out, not to save her, but to offer her the same choice I gave the hunters. "Let go of the hunger, Lyra. Unbind yourself." But her pride was her anchor. She refused to let go of the dark power, and with a final silent pop, she vanished into the abyss she had invited in. The great hall snapped back into reality. The floor was solid stone again, though scarred by the violet lightning. I landed on my knees, coughing, my silver light flickering like a dying candle. But I wasn't alone. Around me, the hostages, the Omegas and the families, stood up, their eyes glowing with a faint, permanent silver. They hadn't just been saved, they had been awakened. "The palace is ours," Silas said, stepping through the rubble. He looked toward the throne. "But the king is still in the dungeon. What is your command, Luna?" I stood up, leaning on my daughter Nova, who had appeared at the entrance, her little face pale but determined. I looked at the ruin of the silver moon. "The silver moon is dead," I said. "Tonight, we rename this mountain. Tonight, the Astraea Empire begins." Chapter 6. The dust of the void had settled, leaving a silence in the palace that was heavier than any sound. The Star Guard stood watch over a kingdom that no longer knew its own name. I walked down into the bowels of the mountain, past the damp stone of the kitchens where I once scrubbed floors, down to the deepest cell in the dungeon. Fenris sat on a bench of cold iron. He wasn't chained, he didn't need to be. The alpha rot had claimed him completely. His skin was gray, and the golden light of his eyes had been replaced by a hollow, flickering ember. "You've won," he whispered as I approached the bars. "The silver moon is a graveyard, my mate is a shadow, and my children, they are gods." I didn't feel the surge of triumph I expected. Looking at him, I only felt a profound sense of waste. "The silver moon didn't die because of me, Fenris," I said, my voice echoing in the small cell. "It died because you believed that power was something you took from others, rather than something you shared with them." "I can't live like this," he rasped, clutching his chest. "Without the bond, without the pack, I am nothing. Kill me, Elara. End the rot. Let me die as an alpha." I looked at the bars of the cell. In the old laws, the victor executed the loser. It was the way of the wolf. but I had promised to rewrite the laws of mating and power. "No," I said, the silver light of my star blood illuminating the dark corners of the dungeon. "Death is the easy way out. It's the old law. I am the lawbreaker, remember?" I reached through the bars and placed my hand on his forehead. Fenris flinched, expecting a strike, but I gave him a shattering. I didn't kill him. I severed his connection to the Alpha line entirely. "I strip you of your rank, your title, and your name," I commanded. "You are no longer Fenris of the Silver Moon. You are just a man, a human man, without a wolf, without a pack, and without the power to ever harm another soul again." Fenris fell to the floor, gasping as his wolf, the source of his arrogance, vanished forever. He was alive, but he was ordinary. To a man who thought he was a god, it was a fate worse than death. I turned and walked away, my heels clicking on the stone. "Where will I go?" he cried out behind me, his voice thin and fragile. "To the world you ignored," I replied without looking back. "Live among the people you called Nulls. Learn to survive without a throne. If you find your humanity, perhaps one day your children will speak to you. But until then, you are a ghost." I emerged from the dungeon into the morning light. Silas was waiting with Leo and Nova. The city of Astraea was moving into the palace, cleaning the soot and bringing the warmth of the star blood to the cold stone. "What is the first law of the new empire, Luna?" Silas asked, his silver armor gleaming. I looked at my children, then at the hundreds of unbound wolves who were finally home. "The first law is this," I said, my voice carrying on the wind. "The bond is a gift, not a chain. We do not belong to those who claim us. We belong to those who see us." The walls of the Silver Moon Palace no longer felt cold. We had scrubbed away the soot of the void and the arrogance of the old regime. But a city is not an empire, and a victory is not a peace. To ensure the safety of the twins and the Forsaken, I had to do what no alpha in history had ever achieved: unify the fractured packs under a single unbreakable law. The great plaza was filled with thousands. There were the survivors of Astraea, the weary warriors of the Silver Moon, and even delegations from the distant Iron Ridge and North Wind packs who had come to see the Luna of the Stars for themselves. I stood on the high dais, Nova and Leo on either side of me. I didn't wear the traditional heavy furs of a pack leader. I wore a gown of woven starlight, a fabric created by our own omegas that seemed to ripple with the heartbeat of the mountain. "For centuries," I began, my voice amplified by the star blood resonators placed around the plaza, "we have been told that our destiny is written in our blood. We were told that a fated mate is a master, and an alpha is a god." I raised my hand, and a sphere of violet silver light blossomed above us. "But fate is not a cage, it is a map, and today we burn the cage." I didn't ask for their submission. Instead, I performed the golden integration. Using Nova's seer abilities and my own power, I projected a vision into the mind of every wolf present. They didn't see me as their ruler. They saw themselves as I saw them, worthy, powerful, and free. The pack link began to shift. It was no longer a forced tether to a single man. It became a shared resonance. A warrior from the North Wind felt the hunger of an Omega from the Silver Moon. A healer from the Iron Ridge felt the strength of a scout from Astraea. Silas stepped forward, carrying a basin of pure mountain water infused with star blood. He knelt, but not as a servant, as a brother. "We do not crown you because you are the strongest," Silas said, his voice echoing through the silent crowd. "We crown you because you were the only one who didn't leave us behind." As I dipped my hands into the water, the silver light solidified. It rose from the basin, weaving itself into a crown of crystalline stars that settled onto my brow. "I accept this burden," I declared, looking out at the sea of faces. "Not as your alpha, not as your queen, but as your Luna, the light that guides you through the dark but never tells you where to walk." The cheer that erupted wasn't the fearful howl of a pack obeying a master. It was a roar of liberation. In the distance, I saw a lone figure in a tattered gray cloak slipping away into the forest. It was the man who was once Fenris. He didn't look back. He had no power here anymore, not because I had killed him, but because the world he represented had ceased to exist. I felt a small, warm hand slip into mine. It was Nova. She looked up at me, her silver eyes reflecting the bright morning sun. "Mama, the stars are happy today." "Yes, they are, my love," I whispered, "because for the first time in a long time, they aren't the only things shining in the dark." The Epilogue. 20 years later. I stand on the balcony of the Star Keep, watching the sunset. Astraea is no longer just a city. It is a sprawling capital of marble and light. Leo is the commander of the United Defense, a man who leads with a smile rather than a snarl. Nova is the High Seer, running the universities where Nulls and Alphas study the mysteries of the Starblood together. The mating laws have been rewritten. Shifters now choose their partners based on the harmony of the soul rather than the command of the blood. The rejection that nearly killed me in the rain has become the foundation of a golden age. I am old now. My hair is silver as the light I carry. People still tell the story of the pregnant rogue who was cast out into the mud. They tell it to their children when they feel weak. They tell it to remind the world that sometimes being rejected is just the moon's way of making room for the stars. I close my eyes, feeling the pulse of thousands of lives connected to mine. I was rejected by a mate. I was cast out by a pack, but I was crowned by destiny, and my destiny has only just begun.